show, we have Jennifer Gaul. Thank you, Jennifer, for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Jennifer is the director at Dana Hall Music School, which is a community organization serving both the Dana Hall students and Greater Boston community with a variety of music lessons and programs. Previously, Jennifer was the executive director of Turtle Bay Music School in Manhattan, and Jennifer has worked with a variety of organizations, including the Philadelphia Orchestra, the Philadelphia Ballet, Chorus America Center of Arts, Education, and Young Audiences of New York.
Wow.
So that came out well.
You did your research.
So Jennifer, tell us about why music? It's clear to me you could do anything.
Oh,
being the woman that you are.
You're very nice.
So why music?
It's interesting. There was nobody musical in my family. My interest came from, I had a best friend who was from a Korean family, and she was about a year younger than I was, and I used to hang out all the time at her house, and both her brother and she took violin and piano. And I used to hang around the piano, and one day her mom called, my mom, and said, "Jennifer's spending a lot of time here." My mom said, "Oh, I'm so sorry." She's like, no, but I really think you should consider getting her piano lessons. So my mom and my dad talked about it, and my father's like, "Well, I'm not buying a piano." And they gave me a recorder, a plastic recorder. I took lessons for a year, and they asked the recorder teacher, and she said, "Oh yeah, no, I would definitely." And so it was really odd. It was always my own thing. My family, I don't think they knew that I was supposed to practice or do anything, and I just sort of, I loved my piano teacher. I had a great relationship with him, and it just sort of grew out of that. And I think I had a rough time in my my undergrad degree with a piano teacher, and it made me very stubborn. And that was when I determined I was going to go for my master's degree and get my master's in music, because I felt like I should do it. And so it was good. I mean, it's just sort of like been a part of my life.
So interesting. And what fields were your parents in?
So my dad was a solar physicist, and he worked for a place.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so natural. Yeah. He worked for a place called Epley Laboratories in Newport, Rhode Island, and traveled a lot when I was young. He was in Africa for a while. I never really knew what he did. The big joke was that he had a secret family. Right. And then my mom was, when I was very young, she was finishing up her master's in English, and I used to go, I was a very docile, quiet young kid, so I would go and sit in the corner of the classrooms. And then she was looking for work, so she did some different things, but eventually ended up as an editor at the University of Rhode Island.
Oh,
so.
Interesting. So you got basically an English degree while growing up?
Yeah, I was about 4, I used to bring my teddy bear.
Right,
James
there you
Rafferty.
Go. Hang out in the back of the class.
Yeah, actually I remember
a composition on Wordsworth.
Yeah, well, her professors were so nice. She had this one professor named Wilbur Doctor, or is it Dr. Wilbur? It was one of those. And he used to take me to lunch, when I was very little.
There you go.
I have these very clear memories of it.
Yeah, and a tea party out of that as well in the middle break.
Me and James Rafferty.
There you go.
Dr. Wilbur.
Dr. Wilbur.
Doctor.
That's too funny. And so after your master's, is there were you looking to stay in the field, or did you consider moving out of the area? Or?
That's a good question. I mean, I did my master's in the University of Texas at Austin, and I met my husband Scott there at the same time. And again, I had a very difficult time in my master's degree. My piano teacher was a wonderful teacher. I found out later that she was bipolar, so that used to really affect how lessons would go, and it was not uncommon for people to just be crying in her studio and having a difficult time. So I finished my concert, you do your master's recital, and I quit because I felt terrible about myself and felt like music had just been something, it had been turned into something that made me feel bad all the time. And my husband was a professional jazz musician, and he just had this incredible passion for it, and I felt like I wanted to support it. And so we ended up, I looking into administration, and he started his fully fledged professional career, and we moved to Philadelphia. And so my involvement with music was really through his career, and then also through working for arts organizations, which are fascinating places.
Interesting.
Full of interesting people.
Interesting. And when you were in college studying music, did you find that there were a lot of women or a few women in the field?
Actually, a lot of women. I mean, in my undergrad, well, it's interesting. My teachers were primarily male, and you know, one of my favorite professors was Dr. James Ladwig, who is music theory, music history. I took everything I could take with him. The first time I had a female teacher was for my master's degree. Was my piano professor, and then I actually had more female professors. Then I worked with a woman named Amanda Vick Lethko, who's responsible for a very popular piano methodology, and she was really interesting. I liked her a lot. And then I think the student body, it depended. Jazz, very male. Classical, kind of split.
So there are fields in music that women tend to go towards, and then there are other fields that men tend to go towards.
Well, jazz is notorious for not being very
female friendly,
welcoming to females, and it's been interesting though, because I think that it used to be that there would be a lot of female vocalists, and they were spoken of a lot of times in very derogatory. They were called, you know, what they called them, finger popping chick singers, and
well, there's a term you don't hear too often.
Yeah. So, wow, I'm aging myself, but it was interesting when I moved to New York City. You really started to see some really fine musicians coming out. And I mean, there's the band Diva, which is all women. There's, I'm going to forget all my people, but yeah, some really, Ingrid Jensen, who's an amazing horn player. So it's definitely, boundaries have been broken, and I've noticed them broken in the time that I've been in music. So. And
did it make you want to get back into full-time?
No. Well, it was funny. Being in arts administration, I learned a ton. The organizations that I worked for were highly dysfunctional. And I worked with, and it was funny, they were heavily female in the administration. And it was really, you know, it was a really interesting experience, because I definitely found myself with a lot of issues and having difficulty working with some of the women. And
but I bet you could pick out who had bipolar by then.
Yeah, I was really good at it.
Clinical diagnoses.
And it's funny, it's interesting now, and I think it's a good thing that it's something that people can talk about, so that you can deal with the, you know, how to function. And it was funny because when I came to Turtle Bay Music School, I had sort of, you know, I was very tired, and my husband Scott had cancer in 2005, and you know, a lot had happened, and I, you know, really went there kind of thinking that I was going to relax and take it easy, and that it was this little tiny music school, and I wasn't going to get involved, and it was, again, a very dysfunctional organization. And I ended up being made the executive director, and I thought, well, now
because you're the functional person.
Pretty much, yeah. It was, and it was really interesting dealing with, you know, a lot of just big personalities. And
do you find that that's the case in the field of music? People have larger than life personalities. The passion sort of transfers from the music to themselves and back and forth.
I think so. I think it's one of the answers to what happens in at least smaller arts organizations with administrators is you get people that are very passionate about what they're doing, but haven't necessarily developed the skills that they also need. And because there's so much passion, there's a lot of emotion.
And they want to translate that feeling to everybody else that comes in connection with their work.
I think so. And it's an interesting thing in the arts that, you know, we're all, you know, I think we all start at least from a place of really wanting to be creative people and make music and do these things. And it's a very difficult path, and there's a lot of disappointment with it, and not everybody handles that disappointment in positive ways. And for me, one of the biggest factors for me actually going back into music and into community music in particular is that you can have a very powerful effect, especially on young students, because you're in the position of being in a one-on-one, and how often are kids on one-on-one with adults other than, you know, parents, family? And to me, it's really important to really nurture it in a good way, because I feel like I've seen a lot of damage done, and I think a lot of people have stories of, you know, gee, I started in music and it was horrible, and I don't want that to be people's experience.
And you actually teach piano classes.
I do. I teach, well, I've been coaching chamber music, and doing some piano teaching, and then I actually took up another instrument. So piano is my main instrument, and I started cello, I guess about a year and a half ago, and then I started drums over the summer, and now I'm doing guitar as well. So
well, there. So and did you take classes to do?
Yeah.
So you took courses in addition to being director.
Yeah.
For these other instruments as well, so that
Yeah.
you could be proficient in them.
Yeah, basically. I mean, I felt like with piano, once I was coaching chamber groups, I really knew nothing about string instruments and tuning and how to do that, and I wanted to know something, and I knew I didn't want to do violin because for me, that is a difficult position to hold.
You didn't like the posture.
Yeah, and cello is, you hug it. I mean, it's a really interesting, and it's such a core.
Everything has different physical properties.
Yeah, and the way you produce sound is very different. So, but I had no idea how to go about working with the instrument, so I started lessons.
And do you think for musicians it's also a matter of not just loving music, but the instrument that they pick has to have some kind of physical connection?
I think so. Yeah, I think it does.
Like people will pick a certain instrument over the other just because of the dimensions of it, or
yeah,
or not just the way it sounds, but
yeah, no, it's true. Or you'll see people change instruments. The person I'm working with now started in flute, went to bassoon, and for me, you know, with piano, piano's it's, you know, actually a percussive instrument. You can't affect pitch. You can't change that in the way that you can with a string instrument, where everything. But then I also love piano because I'm very sensitive to sound. I would say technically I never worked hard enough, but I like to mix sound, and piano can do that in a way that's I think really amazing. But cello has been really interesting because everything you do affects the sound. So, you know, you start, sometimes it's a very horrible sound.
but it's still a sound. And it's quite different, I imagine, from piano.
It's very different. Yeah, it's, I mean, it's a completely different way of holding. I mean, actually, the funny thing, I think people who've taken piano lessons will relate. Piano finger numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Cello, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's different. So this is your one. I cannot get that through my head.
Right.
I just, and
you play the cello like you're playing piano?
I default all the time, and it, you know, it puts, yeah, it's really, I'm still working on it, but it's ridiculous.
I had a piano teacher when I was growing up who was probably from the Paleozoic, and she used to literally look like she'd fallen asleep while I was playing. But if I made a mistake, she'd get up and she'd like hit me on the knuckles with a ruler.
Oh my God.
So you had to be like on your toes. You could never like take it for granted that, oh, she's just asleep and not paying attention.
I know, the Fleischwater School of
But
teaching.
I never forgot my music. So
did you like it though?
I enjoyed it because
Yeah.
I liked the completed piece when I got done.
That's true.
And I would work on it because I never considered myself to be a very talented pianist. But I really did enjoy accomplishing the task and getting it done.
Yeah.
And adding my own little, whatever I was allowed for in terms of the timing and the beats, and because I put my own signature on top of the piece that was already so famous.
Well, you must have been good.
But I enjoyed it. But the funny part was my dog loved it, and he would always, wherever he was, he would come sit right next to me, right on my other foot.
Oh, that's funny.
And he would sing. There's always one spot that I would play in any song that hit some chord with him, and he would yodel. It was the funniest thing.
That's hilarious. Yeah, we had a cat that when I would teach piano at home, he would come sometimes and throw up under the
Well, that,
It was horrible.
Yeah.
And then we had another one that when my husband Scott would practice, would put her ear against the amplifier.
Right.
Just seemed to love it.
The vibration.
Yeah.
Right.
She's probably deaf.
or that. But it sure beats throwing up, so
Yeah,
you had
that
to
was
take one or the
embarrassing.
other.
I just had to tell the student, everyone's a critic.
There you go. So tell me about, so you've done quite a few interesting things, and tell me about your, what is it, the cash cab.
Oh.
Tell me about that experience.
My reality show.
Yeah.
Cash Cab was a lot of fun. If I don't know if you've ever seen the show before, but it's a game show in a cab.
Right.
And
did you know you were getting into this cab, or it was just totally random?
It's pretty random, and it was really funny because they have the cab tricked out with lights.
Right.
So when I got in, and the man that
Felt like you're in a disco.
yeah, and the man that's the host is he's very, very funny, but he'll start with a funny voice.
Right.
So when I got in, and I don't think they showed this on the show, but he got in and he kept saying something. I could not understand what he was saying. I kept saying, you know, excuse me. And then I decided that maybe he wasn't quite competent. So I was like saying to my husband, like, we should
leave.
And then when the cab like burst into lights, I thought like we should really leave.
Go. Yeah,
there was really
now it's really
wrong.
getting strange.
But it's, and trivia is not my thing.
And you got all the trivia points. You won like every one of those questions.
My big 3.
Yeah, well, you know, you were on a great like roll there.
I was incredibly embarrassed about not knowing.
Scott was looking at you like, huh? And you're like, oh, I know the answer to that.
Stephen Biko, though, I'm humiliated that we got that wrong. And I have a good friend who teaches South African history.
Right. Well, it's hard to be under pressure and have to answer those questions. It's, you know, it's different over dinner and like, you know.
Yeah. Well, now I know.
There you go. So next time you're going to ask me Stephen Biko questions, it has to be a candlelit dinner where I can put my feet up.
I will be very calm.
Very calm, that's right.
An ardent admirer of alliteration, what former Jackson 5 member has kids named Jeremy, Jordan, and Jermajesty?
Jeremy, Jackson 5. Michael Jackson, Jermaine Jackson? Jermaine Jackson?
Jermaine Jackson. Jermaine Jackson is right, and you're on the board with 50 bucks.
So tell us about your BBC contributor stint.
Oh yeah, and then What Not to Wear.
That's right.
That was an interesting one. That was actually a lot of fun. So I nominated myself for the show. Normally it's like somebody else, and pretty much because so when my husband got sick the first time with lymphoma, I got very sick in the hospital too, and I lost a huge amount of weight, and I wasn't able to wear nice clothes, so all I had were jeans and t-shirts. And then I, had become the executive director of Turtle Bay, and I was feeling really badly about the fact that I didn't present myself in a very professional way, but I had no sense of how to go about changing that. So I had written into the show.
Taking care of a spouse who's also ill it takes a toll on you. You don't have the bandwidth to really think about matching your clothes.
It's very true.
So
it's very true. Yeah, you don't really think it through. And then it was.
And so, did you have to send in photos of yourself and do a video? And
I sent in photos, and then they had contacted me and asked me to meet them at the Columbus Circle Mall in New York, and I had gone and never heard anything again. So I just figured. Nothing had happened. And apparently they had contacted my husband, Scott, and it's a good thing I'm not a suspicious person at all, because all of a sudden he was texting all the time.
Right.
And I'd say, who are you texting? And he'd say, oh, my personal trainer. And I was like, oh, that's weird. And then we had like a weird fight because I went to sit in a certain part of a restaurant, and he kept wanting me to move. And I was like, what is wrong with you? I just want to sit here.
I like this
leave me
spot.
alone. And it turned out that he was like having to maneuver and manage and get myself, get me into the positions that they needed. And
that's too funny.
Yeah, it was really funny. But the show itself was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
They literally take your entire wardrobe, and they moved it over to the studio. But the thing that was really funny is they took my entire wardrobe, but there was a 2-week gap between when they took my wardrobe and when I got to shoot the show.
So you had no clothes to wear?
I had no clothes for 2 weeks.
Well, that's not good.
Yeah.
If they thought you weren't matching before. Like,
I know, plus I was trying to work. And I
was like, what are you going to wear now?
So yeah, that was, because I had to go back in and ask them if I could have a few things.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh yeah, sure.
I have to go to work.
But they're really nice people. The show just wrapped, so like permanently.
Right.
After 10 years. And
right. I know. I've seen reruns.
Yeah.
Of it on TV, and I flip through the channels and I say, oh, that looks interesting. Some good advice. I had no idea you were a person on this show.
Yeah. Actually, I've been on it 3 times now.
Oh wow, awesome.
Because I was on the original, and then I think partially because I was in New York, it was easy to reach out. So I was on one where their 200th episode, something like that. And then for the final wrap, they had.
And then did they give you a makeover every time that they put you on? Or? So they just expect you to continue their styling tips on your own, and then just have you appear.
Well, and it was very embarrassing.
That's a lot of pressure.
It's a lot of pressure.
You got to look good coming on now when you had no styling help.
Well, yeah, and and it's actually true. And the second time I went, I was dating my husband Woody after my husband had passed, and he's quite a bit younger than I am, and I said something incredibly stupid, and that was the thing that they put up, because they were asking about, if I felt more empowered and sexier, and I said something about, oh yeah, I'm a cougar now. It's like,
oh, that isn't so bad.
Yeah, except that Woody like played it
far
over.
Worse. Well, everyone's got to have something on the other person, right?
Yeah, well, that's true.
for a replay.
It was the first time his parents had seen me, though. I'd never met them.
Good. That
Seeing
must
me
have gone
declaring that I was,
Excellent.
feeding on their young son.
Excellent. Good. Well, now that that's done,
It all ended well.
there you go. There you go. And so that was hard. I hope you don't mind my asking. And how did you get through this? I'm sure that must have been a tough time.
Yeah.
Losing Scott.
Yeah.
And trying to get on with your own life.
It was really. It's so funny because I've always thought about like writing something or doing it, but
Right.
it was so instinctual, I think, because so he had been originally diagnosed with lymphoma in 2005. And at that point, it was sort of the good cancer. So the doctors were saying, you need to get through chemo, but it's going to be okay, and don't worry, and it's going to be fine. And we got through it, and it's life altering because you come up with your own mortality and that of your spouse. And but then he was doing so well, and he was in great shape, and he was productive, and he did another album, and we went to France and did all this great stuff, and then. In November of 2008, he was telling me he had like a swelling in his neck, and I thought it was just a cold.
Yeah.
And we had gone to see my family in Rhode Island for Thanksgiving, and he got very, very, very ill. And I took him back to New York, and pretty much the ENT person took a look and said that he had a tumor, and we needed to go to the doctor. And that just like everything started again. And pretty much, he was incredibly unfortunate in that the lymphoma had returned, but it returned chemo-resistant because obviously everything hadn't been gotten, and who knows why these things happen. But he went through a stem cell transplant, which is I think we were in 5 weeks, 6 weeks of intense isolation. And so what was really good was that I had always felt like I didn't handle the first bout as well as I would have liked. It was really emotional, and
well, there's no preparation for it.
Yeah,
so
you don't know.
How do you handle it well, right?
Yeah, it's true, because it was, and I didn't understand, I didn't really understand all the different things, and the fact you're on steroids, and so, and I felt really badly about this, and when he got sick again, I just decided that I was going to be 100% present, as present as I could possibly be, no matter what was happening. And I was very fortunate in the fact that my job, I was able to so I pretty much just moved into the hospital, and we went through the treatments, and things were looking okay between December and up till the stem cell. Things were going pretty well, and then we spent 5 weeks in the isolation doing the stem cell, which was very, very intense. And we came home, and things were looking great, and we were feeling like it was going to be okay. And 2 weeks after, he had the same node came back up, and at that point, I realized it was, and I was very fortunate. The doctor that we worked with was really great, and Scott had said that he did not want to be in charge. He really wanted me to sort of funnel information for him because it was just too much for him. So she was pretty honest with me, and I knew that our chances were dwindling, but we determined that we would do radiation on the node, and maybe, but she pretty much told me that we would need to go through a second but an allogeneic stem cell, which is using somebody else's bone marrow, but he wasn't going to survive it if we did it, so we had to get him stronger. So focused on that, and then unfortunately after the radiation, 2 weeks, and it came back, and we were in and out of hospital. We were in ICU units because it was stopping, it was pressing on his carotid artery, stopping his heart, and then we went into experimental treatment, and pretty much Scott's feeling was if there was a chance, he wanted to do everything he could, but that I would make the final decision as to what to do next. And it was just, the treatment was too much. And so I think what happened was, when he died, I hadn't really thought beyond what was going to happen.
Right.
And I just, and I think no matter what, you're still in shock. Even though you've had 9 months of preparation, you've gone through everything, and it's so stupid, but I remember just like every morning I was like, well, I'm going to get up, and I don't want people to worry about me, so I'm going to put my makeup on, and I'm going to dress really nicely. And I started going on these shopping binges because I couldn't sit still. I was very, very restless.
Sure.
And I went back to work right away, and just sort of didn't want to think. And the other thing, it's so funny, music became a really difficult thing for me because it was a huge part of our marriage. It was like the soul of our marriage, and I couldn't listen to his music. I couldn't listen to any of the music that we used to listen to. Jazz was off limits, classical. So I went to a younger friend and asked them to recommend some music, and they recommended some stuff like Green Day and Black Eyed Peas, and I just would put it in and crank it and walk the city, like 3 in the morning, be out there, and then I met, you know, my present husband very quickly after all of it, which was I think shocking to a lot of people. Mostly people were really
But it's nice to have a friend, right? It's nice to meet somebody who's
somebody,
a friend you can talk to.
And somebody that wasn't connected to my life before, because I think the other problem I had was I felt like everybody was looking at me for the cracks. You know, when was I gonna go off the deep end, or and I just couldn't stand it. So, so it was, it was a difficult period. But
oh, Jennifer, thank you for sharing that.
Oh, my pleasure.
And I'm sure there are a lot of people who would find that comforting to hear that they're not alone going through all the different things that they're going through.
Yeah, it's, well, you can get through more than you ever think you can, and I've definitely run into a lot of women my age or older, younger too, that have lost, you know, partners, spouses, or been through even like a difficult divorce, and it's all trauma, but you know, you have to know that you can survive it.
And speaking of women and survival, I was going to ask you on a not related topic, but just about the women's movement in this country, which I find interesting because this year is the 50th anniversary. And I was going to ask you, what are your thoughts on the women's movement, and where do you think women are today in America?
I don't know. It's such a good question, and it's so funny because now that I work at Dana Hall, which is an all-girls school, and very much dedicated to leadership of women, and I think I'm unusual in that I was never in a situation of feeling like being a woman was affecting me, and I think it was partially because my mother's background is very unusual. She was, you know, originally from England, but, you know, from families where the women were all educated and were doctors, and she, you know, it never occurred to me that like women might not go and get their college degrees, and my dad was always a very nurturing, very proud of me, and I never felt, you know, I never felt anything from him about anything other than pride and being happy that I could do what I could do. And then in my jobs, I think because I was always focused on doing what I really enjoyed, which was working in the arts and coming across, so I didn't experience what a lot of other women have experienced.
And tell us quickly before we wrap up, upcoming projects for you.
Oh, upcoming projects. Well, I want to get back on the trapeze.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. I forgot
I got a
to ask
birthday
you about
coming
that.
up. So.
I forgot about that. You got to tell me about the trapeze story quickly before
Well, I did it for my 45th birthday. Oh, nice. I'd always, and I think Woody thought I was joking, but I said I'd always wanted to try trapeze, and it was terrifying. Like my teeth were chattering, and taking that first jump.
Right. But they had harnessed you, and
you're harnessed so and all of that. But that first time where you like lean over and try to grab the bar,
and they make you do a routine.
Well, so they teach you, the first thing they teach you in trapeze, I love trapeze because it's about timing and not necessarily about core strength.
Right.
So
Kind of
it's
like
about
music.
Yeah, it's when you hit the things, and it was great because we brought Lily, my stepdaughter, and she was terrified and cried, and then got herself back up there, and she's really getting good at it.
Nice.
I'm not great at it.
So she stuck with it. After
she wants to do more of it.
Your introduction of high wire.
Yeah, we put her up there.
Thanks so much, Jennifer.
My pleasure.
It's been great.